Hello and welcome. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon if you're joining us on demand. Good day to everyone. Thank you for joining us and spending a few minutes with us today. This should be a really good topic for you no matter where you are in practice. I know that we as Henry Schein Dental Practice Transition do a lot of work in practice transition and practice valuation itself, but this should be really good for you, both in that conversation as well as in your day-to-day overall. My name is Greg Auerbach. I'm the Senior Director here with Henry Schein Dental Practice Transitions. Just a quick reminder, this course is not eligible for CE credits. For those of you who may not be able to stick around the entirety of the time, we will be sending this out to you within a week or so, so you can be on the lookout for that. If you can't make it all the way through or you just want to watch it again. If you do have any questions, though, please submit those into the chat. I'd love to be able to get those answers to you. I love making sure that you have the information that you need for your practice and for your overall operations. So if you do have questions, please drop those in. Similarly, if there's anything that you want to know more information on, or any contacts that we can make and help you connect with, whether it be the VAR team or somebody else within the Henry Schein family of teams, which I'll reference a little bit later, please also drop those into the chat. As a conversation of what we're going to go through today, as always, we're going to give you just a brief overview of where valuations and sales are throughout the year. We're going to talk about opportunities overall and targets for success as you look toward the end of the year and coming into the next year. And then we'll discuss why this matters. We spend a lot of time talking about transitions and value. We won't spend as much on it today. We have lots of webinars that are out there specifically tailored to valuations themselves. But there is some relatability to what you're going to do and what we're going to talk about profitability and where it relates into practice value. And always, we wrap up with emergency exit planning because we find this hugely important for you in your practice, and it's often overlooked. My name is, again, Greg Auerbach. I'm the Senior Director here with Henry Schein Dental Practice Transitions. I have 2 degrees, Wake Forest for my MBA, Master's of Business, in Service Operations and General Management. At the University of Central Florida here in Orlando, where I live, I earned a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering. I've worked with practitioners for over 20 years in practice value, practice transitions, evaluating thousands of practices nationwide. I've even worked with a couple of international practices as well. I'm an associate. I work in our business. I was the purchaser of my own business, an owner of my own business, and I was also a seller that we sold to Henry Schein back over 10 years ago. In that, I've also worked with national prominent consulting firms on practice valuations and practice management, all to help you with your practice overall. Here at Henry Schein right now, I'm Senior Director for Valuations, for our operations team, for marketing, for sales enablement, for a lot of different components of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so I touch a lot of the business that we can consistently work through, and also talking with multiple of our team members throughout the country on the day-to-day transactions. As I mentioned, I do live here in Orlando. My wife is Veronica. I have 3 girls, Scarlett, Alice, and the littlest is Colette, even though they're all pretty little together. Having 3 little ladies running around my house, we spend a lot of time at gymnastics, dance, piano, and we don't live very far from Disney World, so we spend a lot of time on Disney and Disney cruises. We also get the privilege of seeing rocket launches out of the back of our house. So I get to say that Alice, my middle one, sees fireworks from the front of our house, and all 3 of them get to see rocket launches out the back of our house. It's a pretty kind of cool place to be able to see both at the same time. As some background as to Henry Schein Dental Practice Transitions, we're the largest single company national representation within dental practice transitions. There are a lot of other firms that are out there, but we are the one that actually covers the entire country as a single team, as a single company. So you can see our reps scattered throughout the country. We also have management and leadership throughout the country. We also have sales support team throughout the country. So we really are widely ranging in geography as well as experience to be able to best suit your needs both nationally and locally. We also do actually have teams in Canada as well as the UK. So we are not just a US company, but we actually do transitions internationally as well. Fortunately for you, your local representative will be the one who will be in your office talking to you, our local transitions consultant. They're there to help you day to day, and you can see again these blue map indicators or where they are generally throughout the country. So you see we have them just with that. What do? We do practice valuations, so those can be transactional for sales. A lot of the cases, that's what they are, buy in, buy out partnerships, but we also do future planning for our practice valuations. We do practice sales as well, so private as well as group practices, practice transition planning, emergency exit planning. We do everything that would be considered a private or a smaller DSO transaction. So if you are a single private practitioner, even if you do sell to one of our DSO organizations, or you decide to partner with a DSO, we will work with you unless you're willing to stay over 5 years and you have EBITDA over $500,000, which is something that we can help you calculate. We do have a team, large practice sales, LPS, that works nationally for those larger practice deals. They are well-versed, experienced, and very good at monetizing their practices. For those of you if the parameters are right. So certainly if you think that's you and you want some sort of assessment, please drop a note over there in the chat and we'll get them in touch with you to learn a bit more. But for the most part, we are your one-stop shop as far as dental practice transitions goes for any kind of practice sale and practice transition overall. We either do it ourselves or we bring in our LPS team as the experts to help you for those larger practice sales. We do have additional resources overall. We do associate placement through Henry Schein Dental Recruitment Services. We have practice acquisition and startup financing. We have equipment financing through our financial services wing. We do insurance credentialing and collection through Unitas PPO Solutions and eAssist Dental Solutions. I'll speak about them a little bit down the road. And then we also do practice development and operations through our practice services. So again, we have a full range of support for you throughout the country for whatever it is, again, that you need. Let's get into it a little bit more. Practice valuations. This is what we've been doing as dental practice transitions. Since 2021, we've done over 2,100 practice valuations. These are actual report documents that have gone out. That's over $2 billion in practice value. That's a couple zeros there. So $2 billion in practice value. Nobody has done more than this since 2021, and have we. We are constantly busy in our practice valuation space. This is what it looks like. You can see our sales over there on the left of all the dots in 2021 of where we've sold practices. And on the bottom right, you can see our valuations throughout the country since 2021. So you can see obviously more dots in the more populated areas, but we really are covering the entirety of the country in what we do. In 2024 alone, we did 423 practice valuations. That's $430 million in practice value. That's value up almost over 8% from the year prior. So practice valuations, as far as practice value themselves, has continued to increase overall. In the last roughly year, a little over a year and a half, we've done 730 practice valuations with over $745 million in capital value and 347 practice sales, representing over $276 million in practice sale price. So we've been very busy. We continue to operate that way. 2025 is looking to end up as another very busy year. Just through this year, as far as practice valuations go, just to give you a picture, we've completed 306 practice valuations through September, and again, over $319 million in practice value. So also very valuable practices overall. Let's get into business. Let's talk the starting point on understanding practice overhead, because overhead is really the core of where profitability is. This is the part that's the outflow between your revenues and your profitability itself. So understanding where you are and what you're doing is vitally important to the rest of any conversation or even analysis on your form. So depending on what specialty you are, this is a metric or a table to give you an idea of overhead. And this is something that we've addressed in several other of our presentations, and you might have seen it in person if you joined one of our local seminars. It is kind of a core document. This comes from one of our lenders, and it's something that they utilize within their underwriting team. This is assuming collections of $1 million And again, this is not locale specific. So this is broadly a broad picture for the entirety of the nation. But you can see in that first column is general practice practitioners, followed up by endodontists, surgical, orthodontist, pediatric, perio, and then prosthodontist on the far right. You can see a breakdown of the larger categories that go into your overhead and rows in this table, totaling in major expenses and then some minor other expenses at the bottom and average profit margin. You can see on the whole, we expect for a $1 million collecting practice, generic location again, of course, then an average profit margin would be about 39%. So overhead is around 60%. You can see endo and surgical are a bit more profitable. Ortho and pediatrics still more profitable than a general practitioner. And you can see perio and prosthodontist coming right in line with general practitioners. Yeah, the reason, there's lots of reasons for this. You can see variations in wages and contract labor between general practitioners in particular and endo and surgical, where there's a lot more profitability. Some of that comes into having hygienists in a practice, where obviously endodontists and surgical obviously do not necessarily have that. You can see in a pediatric office that wage expense is a little bit higher. But then again, other supplies or other expenses like supplies and clearly lab, they run significantly low. Pediatric also has the opportunity to often put in more dental chairs into a space than a general practitioner or most adult-oriented practitioners because we don't have halls. So there's more space efficiency there, so you can get more at a rental space. Some other obviously things we spoke about: laboratory and dental supplies, variations between general practice and most everything else, except for prosthodontists and in some cases orthodontists, although they do swap just a little bit. Rent is typically across the board relatively similar, as well as insurance and expectations for advertising, with the expectation of a little bit more in ortho for how we need to bring in patients when we start to podcasts. A lot of these other overhead components are the same. Now, when you're looking at your profit and loss, this is something to benchmark. You can go back and consider. Again, it's not going to be a one-for-one. It's not going to be exactly right. Every practice operates a little bit differently. And so while there may be efficiencies in one category here that may not be in your practice, that's okay. You may be making it up somewhere else. We already know that in places like California and New York in particular, in the major metro areas, the cost of wages is going to be more than 29%. And we factor that into our valuations and our review of practices when we're doing that, because comparing a Manhattan or Los Angeles or Beverly Hills or San Francisco is not going to be comparable with something that may be more rural and Midwest, or even just something in another part of the country. So all of this ends up being very location specific, which is why part of the reason we have consultants throughout the country to work with you, because we have to have an actual understanding of what's going on the ground. And that's something that you bring to your practice. And when you're reviewing your financials, and hopefully you have an accountant that understands dentistry, that it's something that you're able to achieve for. So again, this is a broad picture of where overhead may land in your practice to think about as you're assessing profitability overall. So when you're understanding and looking at your overhead, though, you have to understand, though, overhead is just going to happen. You operating a business is going to have overhead. Even if you operate the business as you as the only practitioner and the only staff member, you are going to have other expenses in the practice. Now, most, as we saw in that graph before, or the table before, that most of your dental expenses are going to be within your staff team. Now, the staff is not a fixed expense like most of those managements. And if this is news to you, most of those expenses are going to be present in your practice just when you open the door. Okay, you are going to pay utilities, you are going to pay rent, you are going to pay some other number of expenses just by operating your business. And so therefore they are fixed, they are not going to go away. Again, your staff may be a little bit different. A lot of times that's not going to be specifically fixed, although broadly fixed, because it's more considered a step function, whereby as more patients come in the door, eventually you will need to add staff to be able to support that. But that being different than your supply or your lab that is affected when one more patient walks in the door, you're going to have additional supply and more lab expenses. Again, you're not hiring a staff member each time somebody walks in. or your utility is going to necessarily change just because that patient walked in the door. It's just going to be there because you opened the door in the first place. As we mentioned before, not all practices are exactly alike, and this is operationally, patient flow or otherwise. Okay, so just because we put up that table and said this is what $1 million practice looks like, it could be very different for you in the $800,000 office and $1 million two, or in the 2.4 or $5 million practice. There are significant variation there. And again, as you look at locale, those could bring variations as well. So what can you control in this though? A lot of times it's how you're controlling, not necessarily your specific percentages and small variations of your overhead, but a lot of it is reliant on your revenue. So what can you control? First of all, you can control your fees. And great news, because this is something we speak about a lot. 65% of you reported raising fees in 2025. We'll give you a hand clap there. Something we talk about a lot, again, is the one thing that you actually have very tight control over is making sure your fees are in line with the The reported average is over 6%, almost 7% fee raise, which is great because a lot of times that's pegged to inflation or some other nominal amount. So the fact that fees were raised over 7% should be covering the expenses that are going up year over year, regardless of what you're doing in practice. So this is great news. It was great to see, and hopefully you continue that trend. The other things that are in control, and these are things that we're going to talk about today, would be your schedule and how appointments are handled, collection overall and how you're collecting on the production that you do, staffing and what goes on in your practice, and then obviously those miscellaneous expenses that go on a day-to-day basis. Let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk about scheduling and appointments. Because again, this is very important to you in practice overall, because again, it's the driver for revenues overall and a key component of how you can manage your profitability. So what are we going to talk about though is canceled and broken appointments. That's a big deal, right? That is somebody that took a spot on your appointment or on your schedule and they didn't come. So what can you do about this? Okay? So every practice management reporting system has the ability to go and report on broken appointments and canceled appointments. And your front desk, your front office team should be reporting you properly within the system to ensure that you're able to go back and look at reporting. So you want to pull up a report like this. This is from Dentric. This is showing broken appointments throughout the year. You want to review this for repeat patients and families. You want to cross-reference to calculate the scheduled time that could not be filled, because again, this is costly to you. And especially for the case that you have repeat patient examiners that show up on this list over and over and over again, end up in a decision as to how you're going to manage. If this kind of reporting, again, in every practice management system, and provided your front desk team is properly putting it into the system, you should be able to pull up a report of broken or canceled appointments throughout the year. And note, this is actually important. We're going to talk about office policy as far as broken and canceled appointments go. It's important to note that there can be a difference between a broken or a canceled appointment or just something that's moved. And if it's a point that you are not able to reappoint that appointment block, then you should be noting it as probably canceled and a new appointment made. And it's something that you could reappoint for, so say over 24 hours in advance, a week in advance. That's not necessarily a canceled or broken appointment. That would be something that you actually move, and that would be different. We're going to talk about that in a second. So just a consideration to kind of give this some perspective. If you consider, and this is again something that we've done before, but it's relevant to the conversation now. We considered one canceled hygiene appointment. And if you didn't know this, UCR on a national average at the 80th percentile got $170 for one hygiene appointment. And it's a pro fee and half an exam, assuming you don't think of doing an exam every single appointment. Okay, so that's $170. So think about where your fees are as we talk about non-controllable big fees, and consider where your hygiene appointment cost actually is. So if we look at this over 4 days, so your full work week, roughly $170 per day on 4 days a week is about $680 per week. Okay, and I have this twice because we're going to look at a 45-week year. So that's $30,000, almost $31,000 per year. Or a 50-week year, if you work 50 weeks, that's $34,000 per year. That is lost profitability. It's lost revenue. How is this lost revenue though? How is this lost profitability? I mean, clearly it's lost revenue. You didn't bring it in. But you had expenses with those clients. And you don't necessarily get to make that up. So you just have to remember, there are expenses that go along with that broken appointment. You have hygiene wages. A $50,000 hygiene salary is about $32 an hour. At the very least, you potentially lost $32 for that hour if that hygienist can't be doing something else. So you have the revenue component that you didn't bring in, but you have the expenses going out. And then you have the other fixed costs of your operations, which would include rent, utilities, and telephone, and other staff costs, and everything else that goes into operating an office on a day-to-day basis that are not variable because the patient didn't come in. Yes, you didn't do supply. They're not on the list. But all of these other things are, and they're a continuous expense for what you have going on in the health and so on. So where do we go from here? We need to look at the cancellation policy. Again, I mentioned the cancellation policy before because there's a difference between a cancellation or really moving of an appointment. So you need to make sure that you're reviewing and reassessing the cancellation policy. You need to make sure that you establish clear written patient guidance that at least 24 hours is expected if a cancellation is evident. Look, there are going to be cases where that can't come. And you can obviously make a judgment call as to whether each of those cases you need to charge a fee or invoke the actual office policy or not. If you're planning to charge, it needs to be stated in the policy, and everybody needs to see that. That's something we need to be providing to new patients and returning patients, especially if the cancellation policy does change. It should be something that is communicated, though. So there should be opportunities throughout the year to, one, if you need to, again, go back to that policy and note that you do have the policy and that you certainly don't want to invoke it, but you will if you need to, because you have expenses to operate your practice and there are expectations that there are of the patients who actually come at the time that they are appointed, or at least, again, give you notice if they can't. You may need to make sure you communicate with that. I said on another case, on the front office team, if somebody called and said that they are needing to cancel and move their appointment, there are certain skills that your front desk team should have to be able to try to mitigate that and potentially convince the patient to not cancel. Perhaps you don't have availability in the near future to be able to reschedule that. Maybe that is that you book out 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks at a time, and to get them back on the schedule might be difficult. Maybe it might be difficult to get them into the schedule at a time that's convenient to them as well. The front office team that's skilled, and there's many resources that are out there, can have that conversation and completely mitigate a number of cancellations. Again, when we're documenting these cancellations, will be different from moving the appointment overall. Make sure that you're documenting those in the patient ledger, but you again are able to go back and check that reporting in your end to really quantify what's been going on with cancellation for you monthly. And then you actually should be monitoring it. I've been saying check it during the year, and really you should be checking it on an ongoing basis because again, this is the lifeblood of your practice. Your appointments, your time is what drives your revenue. And in that, your revenue is what's driving your overall profitability. When we're not bringing money in, you have no ability to actually make money at the end of the day. So cancellations can be a huge scourge on your practice and something that you really need to be monitoring and watching and something that you can focus on because it's something that you have absolute control over, or at least control over changing behavior. And working with your patients on their behavior is incredibly important. Another thing that you have access to is your accounts receivable. It is another, obviously, it's a front desk operation, but your accounts receivable can be one of those things that actually can be a huge thing in practice transition. But again, it's your day-to-day operations and it's your system and it's how the practice is actually running. So when we look at accounts receivable itself, the metrics we typically say that you should have around 1 month of your average production in accounts receivable, not typically more. And in their cases, to say that you don't typically want less. And the rationale for not having less is that in the case that you go away for a couple of weeks on vacation, or you need to take some time out of the practice for something, your accounts receivable is kind of that continuation of flow that allows for you to continue to pay bills. So accounts receivable and actually maintaining a healthy amount in accounts receivable, not a lot amount, a healthy amount, a reasonable amount, is actually not a bad thing necessarily. So it's something to consider. So overall, again, you don't want your AR to be aged that long. Most of it should not be more than 30, meaning 45 days. Ideally, you'd be targeting less than 25% in 60 plus days. It probably would be some of those insurance plans that are slower to pay. But ideally, you're going to have most of this, if not all of it, in 30 to 45 day overall, and significantly less in 60 and 90 day, which starts to get to be less. Again, this is something you fully can monitor and control, and you can work with your team overall to make sure that you have. Another piece of this in the accounts receivable, obviously, as I just mentioned, will be insurance. And insurance is a big component of how much in revenues you're bringing into your practice. Because in most cases, as you know, those insurance plans are money and negotiated fees. So as of 2022, just so you know, 62% of adults had private dental insurance. This is stable. It's a little bit higher than it was before, but it has been stable in the last several years. Now, there are reports that over 90% of PPO dental plan participants do not fully utilize the benefits. So not only do we talk about insurance as being a challenge in your receivables, because you're working with those companies to make sure you're receiving that money, but again, are your patients actually realizing the value of what they're paying for on an ongoing basis? So what can we do about them? First, as far as your accounts receivable, again, you want to print and review those reports, and as well as the patient credit reporting. But review those receivables and credit reports on an ongoing basis. You should be focused on this. Again, this is a lifeblood of your practice. Having money out there ends up being a huge liability out to you. It's expenses that you paid for and not collected on. And so the cases when they go to collections because they weren't properly collected in the first place is just lost expense for you. You want to ensure that your aging and collections are up to date and you're paying, again, proper attention to them. You want to make sure that you're billing, your front office team is billing regularly and maintaining some regular follow-up with those cash payments, patients that have outstanding balances, and you want to be collecting that. And you want to make sure that you have consistent and directed contact with those insurance companies to ensure you're also getting a proper reimbursement on a scheduled, timely basis from those. If you're not electronically filing, you should be doing that. That makes things that much faster. But you should have a team very focused at getting your money. You produce, you have the expense that you not first, and then you need to make sure that you are collecting that. So a lot of that, again, is on you and how your front office team is trained and how they work at things. But the more focused you're able to put on that, the better place you are as far as your upline revenues, which again, as we talked about, revenues minus overhead is your profitability. As far as your insurance patients goes, you want to leverage at your end. I mean, my doctor does it. Examine charts and reporting for accepted but not yet completed treatment and call those patients. See if you can get them in. This is a great time to be doing that. You have at least 8 weeks of time between now and the end of the year to bring in patients who may have work that they committed to, but they say they're not doing. You can add this with an email to your patients to encourage year-end benefit use. But you have a focused time during this last quarter of the year to be able to leverage something that the patient has already paid for. They already paid for their dental insurance, or their employer has already paid for it. It's already a benefit that's out there. It's now time for you to be able to go in and recognize that and be able to leverage it. So you can do both, though, to the same patient. But like as I mentioned for my doctor, this is the letter that we get each year around this time. This is Greg, it's that time of year again. The holidays are upon us and the calendar year is swiftly coming to a close. We would like to remind you that as the calendar year ends, so do most dental insurance and flex spending plans. It clearly stated what the case is. And again, this is not a long email, okay, but it is clearly stating what's out there. So with that, Any benefits not utilized before the end of the year will be lost forever. Forever. And it's true. You're going to reset and start at January 1st. If you have dental treatment that you've been postponing, so you found that in the charts, perhaps you've already made some phone calls and seen your paper, or you're going to follow up, and this probably might be the phone call. It is important for you to make an appointment as soon as possible. As soon as possible, because as you know, as you get closer to the end of the year, you want to take time off for the holidays. Your schedule becomes out in a spider. So get the patients on the schedule in November, early December. Sometimes that treatment's going to take several weeks, as you know. To schedule all your family's appointments and use the money and benefits you earned. You earned it, you paid for it. It came as a benefit to you in working for your employer. You earned that benefit, it gives an ownership. Please call the office to schedule an appointment. Simple letter, doesn't say a lot. Doesn't need to say a lot. It's just that simple reminder to say, hey, you've got something, come in and use it. Use it with us. It's only valid with us. So this is something that you should be doing if you haven't been doing it. Take a letter like this. Look at the personalization of it and make sure your patients are getting it. We do have additional resources, as I mentioned before, for insurance and collections overall. We have United PPO solutions. They do credentialing. They do consultation on PPO participation and negotiation of those fee schedules. United is a great opportunity, a great team member to be able to help you with that and help you realize more from your current insurance relationships and potentially new insurance relationships. eAssist Demo Solutions, they help with collections. This covers both bases. eAssist covers collections, submitting claims, posting EOB, maintaining consistent follow-ups, and resulting in the reduction of 90-day or 90-plus day AR balances, hopefully, if not nearly to zero. That can be done. I've transitioned many practices that have AR that is generally all in 30 to 45 days. It is possible to be done. If you don't feel that you can do it yourself, again, we have resources to help you, but this is hugely, hugely important for you in your practice. And again, it's something that we can implement very quickly, even in the coming weeks before the end of the year, to springboard you in to next year. If you would like help with either of these, just again, drop a comment on the side. I would be happy to get you in touch with the experts over there on both of those teams. These are part of the Henry Schein family overall. And again, excellent resources for you in strengthening the revenue of your practice and therefore increasing the profitability overall. As I mentioned before, again, you already have the expense in these patients. You need to make sure you're collecting the most as possible, or at least you should be collecting free patient. Let's talk about another thing, is your team. Now, we talked about your team, especially your front desk team, and training them quite a bit. Okay, I've already alluded to that, and the way that's coming down to is what those practice management components are and what the compensation points are from the front desk team. But your team, as I mentioned in the overhead slide, they are your most expensive component of the overhead in almost every case. Okay? And so in looking at profitability, your team plays a huge component. What is it? I think so. They are the most costly financial line item of your profitability. They, of course, are also what makes your practice unique and successful, though. So there they balance here. So you need to understand that big picture, understand how important they are to your practice, but then you need to monitor the small component. We're going to get into that in just a second. How do we talk about that? It's reviewing and analyzing first the full thoughts about the practice. You need to understand what that regular cost is that your staff payroll in the first place, right? We deal with a lot of practitioners and simply they don't know. They don't know what their regular staff payroll is. And that's in payroll reporting. That could be you tracking it internally, whatever it may be, understanding just what your regular staff payroll comes out. But in addition to that, you have holiday and sick or well pay. You have insurance benefits. You have retirement, profit sharing costs, bonuses, continuing education and people for it, uniform, fuel, mileage, or just time allowances, routinely having a staff member leave early in the afternoon because of expectation. So that is a time allowance. Perhaps you're paying them for full-time work, but they leave at 2 o'clock every day instead of 5. Okay, that is an additional benefit and a cost to you, and you need to understand it. There's also the cost of temporary or casual labor. Sometimes this could be good. This could be for maternity. It could be for a staff member that maybe broke the arm and they can't come in for some health-related reason. Or you're just growing and you need to add some temporary labor until you get large enough to hire that right staff member. The temporary and casual labor component of the overall staff cost, though, is real, and it's something that we need to factor in and you need to consider when you costs in your project. So this is more. It's not, again, just your regular day-to-day payroll expense. There's all of these other items that go into your staff cost and payroll. So these are the challenges that come up with your team. Okay, so when we talk about even regular pay, you have a tenured staff member. Okay, these are typically, again, these are your most trained. These are sometimes your best, most experienced team members. So the problem is that they've been with you for 20, 25 years, and maybe you've been giving them annual repeat pay raise every single year. In some cases, what that does is it puts them out of market for compensation, and it becomes an artificial drag on your practice. Okay. This is something you don't necessarily know you're doing. Obviously, it's something that you're doing with this team member, and these team members have been with you for a long time. You need to be on allegiance to them. They've helped you, again, be successful. But those pay raises have gotten them out of market, and again, made your overall staff cost and overhead cost eventually artificially bloated. So the solution to that, obviously, is something you have to do ahead of time. You can't necessarily go back and say to that staff member that you're going to take a like that. But if you're getting into that situation, if you can recognize it early enough, an immediate solution would be to change how that happens on a year-over-year basis and look at one-time maybe stipend or bonuses as opposed to continuing to increase pay by a percentage or something each year. You can also look at other kinds of benefits that are out there. Again, making them more fixed, not something that compounds year over year over year, which again gets out of people at some time. One way to solve this also is overall staff bonuses. Okay, it's a solution and a problem. One problem that comes with this is those yearly, and they could be annual, they could be semi-annual bonuses, but you're giving them out every year. The problem is that they become expected. That becomes part of staff payroll. So if you're giving them to the entirety of the staff, and you're doing it every year, and it's very regular as far as that goes, then it's no longer a bonus, it's a part of staff compensation, and it needs to be treated and assumed as such. So going forward, you have to continue doing it, or you essentially are guaranteeing wages. So the solution to that is to switch, and this is something that you actually could switch to, even if you've already been doing it. But the solution is to switch to more performance-based bonus plan. That could be productions, collection, profitability, innovation, service to the office, whatever it may be that it is. When you're assessing performance, that's where we're going to tie in the bonuses, as opposed to just being present in the balance. Okay, you want to give a holiday bonus, which is essentially your gift during the holiday time. That's one thing. It's typically smaller and not. When it becomes a little bit out of line or troublesome for the practice, are larger bonuses throughout the year, or even at year end, that you're going to be over and over and over again because you become expected higher compensation. Then there are other stock and fringe benefits that become a problem as well. There can be regular meals in the practice, travel, gifts, other compensation. Again, anything that becomes regular is expected. That's part of compensation at that point. It is not a fringe benefit. It's not a bonus. So a solution in these could be experiences and events, both less regular. They could be, again, tied to practice performance. They could be team building. They're things to enhance the practice as opposed to, again, just being another component of pay. It's a change in modality. It's a change in your mindset and how you approach the practice. But again, in the case of how that gets paid out and how the overhead line item fits year over year, if it's paid out on a regular basis, it's a line item. If it's not, then it becomes more of a bonus, it becomes more variable, and again, you can tie it to performance or look to ways to tie it to enhancing performance going forward, building morale, building team, building allegiance to your practice overall, not just through sound. So some strategies that go along with this: annual budgeting. You are annual budgeting. There are great practice management facilities that are out there that help you do this. This is life-changing for you as a practitioner and as a business owner. So what you need to do in this case, this is the broad overview, but this is something, again, you should work with somebody to try to get this down perfectly, because it doesn't work. And again, it can free you and your practice overall. But as it comes to staffing, when you're annual budgeting, you want to review your current year's total staffing expense, see what that is. Because again, that's kind of fixed already. We've already beaten up. You want to adjust based on the annual performance reviews. Again, we're not just giving bonuses, but we're going to give adjustments to payroll and to pay based on performance. You want to look at a targeted staff expense overall for the upcoming year, and ideally we get those into target range norms. That could be as low as 22% or less. You saw on the overhead sheet, we could potentially be above 17 or 15%, depending on the type of practice and how efficient it operates. 32% is kind of the top. Sometimes it gets a little bit higher, but again, this is based on locale overall. But you want to kind of step back, look at your overall staff expense, look forward, and try to target that staff expense to be within the range norms, so we can start controlling where that's going to be. Establish a production and related collections of where you want to be for next year. And then you want to communicate with the team about how budgeting is going to work. And our pay increases are going to be based in the future on maintaining that percentage target. So again, you're trying to stay within range now. And the amount that's going to be pooled and available for increases based on performance is going to be dictated largely by keeping the staff expense as the whole within the range norm. But again, with production and collections going up in the following year, there's more money available to do that. From there, again, we want to minimize those bonuses that become regular, focus on team experiences, and if you need to get into bonuses themselves, ensure, again, that they are production and productivity based, they're service based, something that's giving back to the practice, to the patients, for doing a great job. Again, not just for coming to work. For coming to work, that's what regular pay is for. And that's where you need to look to bring that in and focus and control it. Use bonuses as a curve. We see many practices where the staff expense is out of line. And sometimes that's because the practice is actually underperforming for the number of staff members. When we're doing our work in valuation and transition, we can't let staff go. If you have that staff, and that's the staff that has helped you to operate that practice, we have to keep that staff as is, where it is. Okay, so it's not an option just to let staff go. Now, if you have a family member that does not provide services in the practice, that's another story. That's obviously something that would be added back to the practice. But if you have your staff and they're the ones that are operating the practice, you want to look to get that staff cost in line. So that's one way, is to grow through this. But in a lot of cases, if your staff percentage is too high, it typically means that we need to increase your production and collections to help accommodate that. Because again, on some level, and again, this is not meant to be detrimental to your practice, but on some level, you're being inefficient in the way that it's operating. And so we need to look to fix that. And we need to get those into norms so that, again, you can enhance your profitability. It's not only helps the value, but also transition in your day-to-day. So your staff is your biggest expense, which is why we're spending time conversing about this. It's also your biggest challenge. So why does budgeting work, though? It aligns expenses with revenues to counter the compensation creep. So that creep is that, again, you continue to stay out of range norms, and staff costs continue to go up, even though your practice may not. It resets that mind, though, to also encourage that performance base. Everybody individually and for the practice is focused on growing your revenue lines. And then grow your revenue line, that's your opportunity to increase your profitability. And again, pay them more money to come to work because everybody's working efficiently as a team. It establishes strong process and procedures. And again, for the sake of transition in the future, it sets an expectation for that future owner. because the staff already understands how that operation works. Good systems develop into good practices. Good practices bring higher value because a purchaser is able to understand that and able to continue that. You've invested that into the practice and therefore the value is gone. You have in essence built a stronger business with a strong team. And again, that's what is the maintenance. That's what a purchaser is buying in most cases, because they want to see that continue to flow easily. That's why you have the ability to sell practicing, because the ship can continue sailing. And so the better you're able to build that ship, doing things like this, the better off you're going to be. Business and profitability have kind of been four-letter words within dentistry overall. Reality, though, is you run a business, and you do have the ability to be profitable in that business, even while providing high quality of care. They are not mutually exclusive. So spending your time doing this is beneficial to you, your team, your patients, and the country. When we talk about this, what's your year-end checklist? What are you supposed to be doing now? We've talked about several different items. What are your takeaways, though, to the fire people? Let's take a look at those items. Just in the next few weeks, as you look into next year, review those broken appointments. Spend time considering them. Gather your reporting. Look at frequency and value. Understand how much those broken appointments are costing you. Determine if you need to rework your patient policy, and we have things that can help you do that if need be. And look at internal process changes at the front desk and the front office team if necessary. And make sure you're communicating. The quality of your business is on you communicating with your team, because then your team can be good communicators with your patients. So communicate. Once you've done this reporting and you've worked with your front office team, decided there should be any separation of patients. And are they repeat vendors, the cancellation, and what is that doing to your practice about that? Even if you've been charging them a cancellation fee, what is that doing to your practice? You're taking a spot from somebody who likely is to come to their appointment. You strongly consider should there be any separation if need be to clean up that portion of your practice, because again, it's not just patients affecting patients, but it's patients affecting you and the team when the operation team focus on. Look at the receivables and collections. And again, receivables and collections. There are many times that we get to a closing, or we get to close the closing, and we pull these reports, and you see a patient credits report, which we do talk about as much, but that goes with your receivables report. If we see a credits report that's outstanding, that has a significant amount of money in it. If you want to get ahead of that, that's a great thing. So go any day now, print your credits report, understand it's on there, see if they're actually valid credits, and try to clean those up. But as far as your receivables go, make sure you're examining that report, understanding the collections, and making sure you're collecting the work that you're doing. You want to reduce that AR, okay? You want to clean out old balances. You want to get most of your AR within 30 to 45 days. That's your collection procedure. Then if you have old balances out there, go out and try to collect them as well as possible. Having 10-year-old balances on your receivables reporting probably isn't great. Is the patient still coming into the office? Do you know who that patient is? Why can't we collect that money? Is it just time to write it off? So clean up that reporting, but make sure you understand what's in it first. If you need help getting to that reporting, again, drop a note in the comments, we'll get you help, because it's common in every practice management report or system to get that report. You want better steps, though, to collect, okay, that both from insurance company and cash paying patients. Make sure you have processes and a front office team that will be persistent to collect your money. That part of their job is to make sure that money is coming in the front desk. Remind patients with insurance again that those benefits are going to reset, and so you can fill your schedule for the balance of the year. You really shouldn't have space between now and the end of the year at this point. You should be able to fill that, especially if you have PPO patients in your health. From there, if you need it, and I will say in most cases, when we're looking at practices, most of you need it, consider some resources to help in both fee negotiations and collections. They can't always be successful as far as fee negotiation goes, but it's worth looking into. We didn't speak to this, but I spend many seminar and webinar speaking about the cost of reduced fee dentistry, and just a few percentage points of loss of fee can be detrimental to you as a practice. And it could put you at a point where you are breaking even or losing money on procedures just for how much you're not collecting. So this is a huge, huge soapbox item. If you aren't able to do it yourself, if you are not resetting your fees every year and leaving that with the insurance companies on a regular schedule to be able to increase your reimbursements, then you need to consider asking for some help. And again, we have resources for that. If your front desk is not great at collections, but they're great at working with patients, again, we get help for that. And they typically can cover their costs in what they do by bringing them new revenues. And again, they'll drop news, probably your overhead, and cover your profit. Well, again, do what you can to manage your overhead. Understand that your team is your practice, but it's also your largest expense. You need to balance that. Make sure you have your methods and retool them if necessary to provide increases in pay. Orient, again, to performance as opposed to tenure. And review balance of line items that are for small tweaks. But again, don't lose the forest for the trees. Right? You could be looking at small percentages overall here and there, but you don't want to lose the bigger picture overall because that's your practice. Okay? And so the small percentages then may add up and worth looking at, but again, you don't necessarily go too far, that become detrimental to your business. What are we talking about kind of in that? There's other considerations as far as profitability goes. Why does it matter overall? Personal take home. Your day-to-day lifestyle is dependent on your profitability. And again, those small percentages can make that difference. But there's also year-over-year inflationary pressures. And, we've experienced them much more in the last few years, especially in the last 5 or so years. But inflationary pressures do not go away. Cost of everything goes up year-over-year. So your personal take home doesn't go as far. So you need to continue to make sure that you're maximizing your personal take home to cover those increases. Not only that, though, your future and your retirement is getting more expensive every year and every day. The earlier and the more you're funding, the earlier you're likely to find retirement. So again, if you're joining us and you are, 20 or 30 years from retirement, first, thanks for being here. This is great. This is what you should be doing, planning for the future. But now is the time to make sure that you're funding your retirement as much as you can. Now, you may not think about it, you may not want to, but this is when you get to benefit from compounding interest and growth year over year. That said, also, retirement is going to become more expensive year over year. Inflation doesn't go away for retirement, and expenses are always going to continue going up. So the amount that you need is going to continue going up year over year. Your practice value also is dependent on this. I'm going to address overhead excess is not necessarily bad back. Think about that. For example, $10,000, and just $10,000 of extra overhead can equate to $50,000 in value. So if I can find $10,000 that I can have back, there are times that I can equate that to $50,000 in value. That's relatable, it's transitionable, it's financeable, so it can be a big deal. Now, not every $10,000 is going to turn into 50, but there is a multiple there, and it makes a difference. So again, working on your overhead, but not to the point that you're honey pinching and really, really, really tightening the belt, but everybody's uncomfortable, can be hugely important to you, not only for your current, but for your retirement, as well as your practice value. So, speaking of practice sale, in transition, we have the issue that can come up about affordability for our purchaser. So yes, your practice may be grossing $1 million, but at the end of the day, after they pay for the practice and pay for the lender, that is, pay back the lender, maybe each year they're only making $175,000. That would be an affordability issue as much for street, not a full debt. They would need to make more money. So that could mean that they could not buy your practice. The other component out, which I just referenced, is the compromised ability for a lender to lend by market value. So really making sure that your overhead is in line can be hugely important to the success of your practice transition. Looking at something else, so this is what we look at. This is a pro forma for a practice as an example. If you look at collections, that's your total income line. Then we look at your overhead. And this is after adjustments. So that's what those add backs are. And then we look at your practice net income. So in this case, we have a practice that's doing just over $1 million. We look at all the line items and we get to 72% overhead, and therefore a practice net income of 26%. Now this is pre-debt service. So from the $268,000, we're going to take out debt service. Okay. And for the practice price that this one was evaluated out, that's going to be roughly $100,000. You then see total income and overhead income. In this case, for this practice, we have staff costs at over 33%. So we took all the line items, and I'll pick back so you can see it again. We have all the line items. Staff costs are adding up over 33%. CE costs in this practice were over 6%. That's 39% overhead in the practice, which is a drain on the overall practice. If you look at some variation though, when we look just at these two categories of employee salaries and CE, so you can see on the left, we have overall employee salaries for 35%, but we adjusted those now then to what is a more reasonable 22%. Again, this is not something that I can do in your practice just off the top. This is something you have to work on over time and manage that to get it down to the right number. In the other case for CE and travel, if you can manage that properly, maybe take more on the web. We actually understand that this was not CE that you need to travel to exotic places, okay? And we can run just those line items in line. We now have an overhead of 58, almost 59%, practice spending from a 39%. We went from, or we are at now, $407,000 of net income. Prior was $268,000, the difference of $138,000 of additional net income just in these two categories alone. That's an 18% change in personal take-home. 18%. Whether it's you or for a buyer or whatever, it's almost 20% more take-home in those two categories alone. Again, CE is not one that you normally would think of, but how you're spending your CE in travel, and again, if it becomes a benefit to the team, can hugely affect the overall overhead expense and profitability. Your employee salaries, again, it's not something you can change overnight. I am not suggesting that you should go home and terminate your staff and hire everybody new. But it's something, again, you should monitor. Make sure your staff is performing to the highest possibility, that your practice is performing to the highest possibility, and that your gross collections are able to support the team that you have. Even if you say that the staff is underperforming, but a new purchaser can come in and change something, that's not the way the transition and value works. That is not the way that a lender looks at it. If you are not capitalizing on what's going on in your practice, you will not see the value and the benefit at the end. So these are focuses, but this is just the idea of how little change can happen to make something work. Again, the $268,000 of prior net income, take off the $100,000 it is to buy the practice, the annual expense to buy the practice. And in that case, a purchaser may be taking home $170,000, which is typically not enough for purchasers throughout the country. That said, if you were having now $408,000 and you take off even $120,000 for the amortization of the loan and the cost of that loan, you're talking $290,000, which is absolutely workable for a person. Huge, significant difference. So what do we talk about? We talk about planning, don't panic. I know I'm giving you a lot. What do you do about the staff? What do you do about these different things? Again, we have resources for you. But how do we uncover them? And we do that by planning. And our planning is through a practice valuation. So what is your practice worth today? This gives us a springboard to understanding how to fix things going forward. So it's the first step in determining areas of opportunity for also not just knowing where your practice is, but where we can increase value. What tools can we bring into your practice to make it an enhanced value going forward? We base this on financials, location-based equipment, location, market trends, all these different components go into it. This is, again, why we have something local to work with you, as well as the largest national database of transition anywhere in the country. This is essential for making informed decisions about what you want to do, not just for selling, but for financial planning and a future transition as well, of course. And in case of an emergency, this is something that you need to have on hand and accessible for your family and for your estate. It makes things much easier. So what is a one of our valuations look like. This is the cover. We did our valuation this year. We look at all kinds of components of information, graphs on your demographics, your overhead overall, your procedure mix. We put that into multiple methodologies, which I'll talk about before. We look at demographics overall. We look at the market and what we've sold in the past as far as our historical database goes. You leverage all of this to come together. We are also the only ones that can leverage Henry Schein One and Jarvis Analytics to dive deep into your practice itself, uncover other components of your practice that you may not know about, to be able to advise you going forward if that's where you want to be. Jarvis is another tool, the practice management dashboard that overlays over most practice management system that can open up and unlock opportunities for you in the practice. These accounts receivable and collections and scheduling things, these are things that Jarvis would be able to help with. So again, if Jarvis would be something you'd be interested in learning more about, please again, drop a note over them. It's not meant to be a commercial, but we use Jarvis as a Henry Schein family tool to help our valuation help you do better. And it's one of the things that is not something that somebody else has in the country. It's unique to our valuations and our company overall. And it can be a huge benefit to you in understanding not only your practice now, but where your practice potentially could go. We have a team of analysts. We take in all this information, they review it, they look at these three approaches, which are the business methodologies for evaluation, the asset approach, the market approach, which looks overall at the market, again, historical sale, and income approach, which looks at, again, the profitability, EBITDA, the earnings of your practice to come to a number. The analyst looks at all three of these methods. Again, the assets looking at tangible and intangible, what the market may bear, and what the financial component, where your profitability works in the overall practice, and you form a final opinion based on all of that data. Now, again, we have more data to go to each one of these approaches than anybody else in the country. They're deep, they're knowledgeable, and it gives you it gives you items that you're able to work with as you go forward in practice. It's not just the practice value today, but the practice value and understanding what we're doing forward. If you would like to talk to us about practice valuation, again, there is no obligation. Your local transitions consultant will be happy to give you more information, show you more about what's in here, what the process is, what the methodology is. This is super, super important for you. Again, even if you're not transacting in the near future, we can use this as a tool to get your practice operating even better. Either use a QR code or bit.ly/pval inquiry, PVAL inquiry. That'll get you to a form, or again, put your name in the chat, practice valuation, we'll get you in touch with your local consultant to get information. As we look to wrap up, this is hugely important. My practice, or my original business, came with 4 of us in the business. 2 of us were MBAs. 2 of us were retired practitioners. Both of those cases, one was my father and one my other partner, both were disabled practitioners. They did not plan to leave clinical industry, but they had to because they didn't sleep. We have 2 exit strategies. One is that planned one, which again, neither of my partners were there for. But the other is the emergency exit strategy. And to be honest, we deal with this much too often throughout the year. If you're not aware, there's a lot of literature out there about this. Only about 30% of practices will sell within 90 days of the practitioner passing about. Those are the ones that have planned. These are those steps. And you know, because you've read it, that that's the case, that your estate, your family, whoever is being up is going to make the most out of your practice is by selling it quickly. Only about 40% will sell, or another 10% will sell after 90 days. And that means 60% of practices overall do not sell. There is no value at the end of the day left because there was not planning. So please take the time to plan. These are our resources for you. This is a letter of instructions. In the case that something happens, this is all the information on the practice. This is the lead in a place that everybody knows about. It's the fire extinguisher. In case of emergency, open this envelope and use this information for the practice to keep it operational. We will give this to you complimentary. We feel it's that important QR code or henryscheinDPT.com/whatif, or again, put your name in the chat, the letter of instructions, and I'll be happy to get this package over to you. Again, this is a complimentary resource. It's just information that anybody needs to know about how to operate or who to contact about your practice in the case that something happens to you. Where does this go? Draft that letter of instruction, then as soon as possible, get a practice valuation, because having that on file will help you transact faster. In the case that something happens, we know the practice value. We just need to update it because we've already looked at the information, and then we can get to market very quickly. If you have any purchase agreements, if you have partners in your practice, make sure that a transitions consultant looks at them. We just want to see it for the transactional component, but you probably want to have an attorney look at them, especially if they haven't been reviewed recently. If you have leases, make sure you get those reviewed. We didn't even speak about leases, and leases is a huge component to transition bills and all. If you need lease help, again, put a note, we'll get you. We have resources to help you with leases. The leases can be the make or break for a transition or transaction. So please, please, please make sure you review your lease and make sure there's nothing in there that prevents you from actually leasing. Or I'm sorry, transacting and getting a new tenant. If there's any feedback on any of this, discuss it with your CPA attorney. Again, we are resources overall. henryscheinDPT.com/whatif is our resource. We use the QR code here now. We cannot stress enough the value of the letter of instructions. It's all upside for you. Please take advantage of it. We suggest, again, strongly suggest you have a valuation done and now, because having that on file can help. But also, again, as we discussed, it can help springboard you into future value, increasing the value of your practice, increasing your take home, increasing your profitability. So all of it gets together. But this letter of instructions, again, is complimentary. It is that important. Please have it on file. As always, we want to thank you for spending time with us. You can see again QR codes for the valuation as well as the level of instructions below. Profitability is your day-to-day. Okay, again, collections is led by production. That leads into your overhead, which leads into your profitability. Your profitability is your day-to-day costs, paying your day-to-day lifestyle. It's funding retirement. It's building your future value and the future sale price of your transaction down. Okay. All of this ties together. All of it is very important. We again have resources. We want to help you. We want to see you successful in practice. Business is not a four-letter word for dentistry. Profitability is not a bad word in dentistry. You can again do this with relying on high quality care, and we look forward to working with you to helping you get there. Again, thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you soon.